Episode Revenant is finally here, which means we have a bunch of nerfs but also a bunch of buffs as well as new exotics and improvements. So today we're opening up this Season 25 class builds playlist, and first up I introduce you to our new insane Prismatic Void Warlock build featuring infinite Nova Bombs. Now with the launch of Revenant, we got a bunch of buffs to both the School of Dire Ahamkara and also Bad JuJu, with School of Dire now granting the ability to get super energy on weapon final blows while having Devour, and Bad JuJu's perk lasting longer. We can combine both of these exotics to literally feed that super energy and transcendence bar so that we can get our abilities and supers insanely faster than normal. Now I've tested this build with both the Void subclass to see how that performs with getting super energy faster while using certain Void fragments, but also the Prismatic subclass since the super that we're using is exactly the same, but we also keep the core features of the build, like having Devour easily triggered and also being able to weaken enemies with our grenades, which we're going to have almost all the time in endgame content. There is a little bug going around where you're not always getting super energy back from super final blows even while Devour is active, but while being transcendent. So just be aware of that little issue, so if you are throwing any Nova Bombs, just make sure that you're doing so while not transcendent, just so you can get a bit of that super energy straight back. But we're going to be getting faster supers, we're going to have Devour pretty much all the time as well as our abilities. We're also going to become transcendent frequently and also get some extra benefits with the build as well, which to be honest really does wreck everything. In fact, sometimes it does feel better using this build solo alone, just because having teammates using other crazy builds killing everything does kind of put you in a rough spot when you're on the clock trying to keep Devour active by constantly getting kills. And if those ads aren't around to kill, then that's going to be a slight problem. If you're enjoying this build video, feel free to check out my other builds which you can find in the playlist down below or on my Mobalytics page, see the links below. Now when it comes to the gameplay loop, there's only really one way you should be using this build, and that's using an ability to activate Devour, and then from there you just kill ads. Ideally with weapons like a Bad JuJu, because this will generate the most super energy. You might not always use this build to perfection, because it does rely on having a ton of enemies to kill, so if they're not around, then you can't exactly recharge that super. But when they are around, that super bar is going to rapidly fill up in seconds. It's kind of hard to say don't use the build, because the build is just so strong even in endgame content where you're massively under the recommended power level. It will just outperform a lot of current and older builds. Now the two core exotics that we're using with this build are Bad JuJu and the School of Dire Ahamkara. Now Bad JuJu did get a buff, so now the String of Curses perk will last longer, which is great for endgame content where it might take a bit longer to kill enemies, but kills will refill the magazine, increase its damage for a short duration, and grant super energy based on the amount of stacks that you have with that perk. So put simply, just keep killing enemies with it, and that's basically as simple as it gets. One of these subclass fragments that we're using by the way is Facet of Dawn, because powered melee hits against targets will make us radiant, and that just helps buff our Bad JuJu a little bit more by giving it that 25% damage bonus. So by having that on in the Prismatic, if you're going the Prismatic route, is a fantastic fragment to use, which I strongly recommend. With the School of Dire Ahamkara being our exotic helmet, this did get buffed, so it now provides additional damage resistance during Nova Bomb, but also Nova Bomb final blows and weapon final blows while you have Devour active grants super energy. So as long as Devour is active and you're getting kills, even if you're not using a Bad JuJu, you will get more super energy. But with Bad JuJu combined with this exotic helmet, you're going to generate super energy at a stupidly fast rate than using say just any legendary weapon. When you're on Prismatic, Bad JuJu is your best option, because since it's a kinetic weapon, that means it's also going to fill up that transcendence bar for both the light and darkness energy pretty quickly, and those abilities, especially the grenade, can be pretty lethal. You do have an alternative kinetic weapon to use though, especially when it comes to endgame content, and that is the Outbreak Perfected, because it's just a great weapon to use all round, and sure you won't get your super as fast as Bad JuJu, but it's a great source of easy DPS when you don't have ammo for other weapons, and that is also going to rapidly fill up that transcendence energy as well, much like Bad JuJu, but we do have unstoppable pulse rifles this season, so both weapons do make a good loadout choice when it comes to using them in endgame this season. Within our Prismatic subclass, there's a few things that you're going to want to make sure that you use. Firstly, make sure that you have the Nova Bomb super equipped, since that is the core part of the build and the main reason why we're using the Skull exotic in the first place. But we are using a Healing Rift with an Incinerator Snap melee ability and a Vortex Grenade. For aspects, Feed the Void is required because by defeating the target with an ability, we will activate Devour, and we need Devour to be active so that we can generate that super energy faster, but also get the grenades faster as well, on top of getting health and kills. So Devour is a pretty powerful aspect and buff to have, so make sure that that one is slotted on. The second aspect is mostly down to preference. I prefer Bleak Watcher, and I'll explain why in a second, but Helion is a great choice to use if you want to go the simple route, and Weaver's Call is also great. If you want another reliable option to activate Devour, then I would go with the Weaver's Call, because if those Threadlings kill enemies, it will count as an ability kill to activate that Devour. Now, although we will be throwing our grenade 9 times out of 10, Bleak Watcher is a good aspect to use within this build for 2 reasons. Firstly, it does a great job at slowing and freezing enemies, and also sort of helping with our Devour activation. But secondly, we are in a stasis heavy season, so using artifact perks like the Cosmic Crystal, we can buff our Void Grenade and our Nova Bomb's damage against those enemies affected by a stasis debuff, which will be from our stasis turret. And bear in mind, those turrets do last a long time, and with Devour active and a bunch of enemies roaming around, you'll easily get that grenade back quickly in most situations to either throw down another turret or use the actual Void Grenade itself. Now, by using the Fragment Facet of Dominance, we can weaken targets with our Void Grenade, so not only we will be dealing more damage to enemies affected by stasis, but we will also apply that weaken debuff for the 15% extra damage against those targets. So even if we don't have a turret up, we have the grenade, and if we don't have the grenade, we probably have a turret. But either way, any enemy that is affected by one of those, just launch a Nova Bomb in their face, but do so while you have Devour, so that you can get at least some of that super energy straight back if you manage to get a few final blows with it. The other fragments we have are Facet of Grace, so that defeating targets with kinetic weapons grants bonus Transcendence energy. Then we have Facet of Hope, so that elemental buffs being active to us will recharge our class ability quicker, always handy to have, especially in the endgame. And then Facet of Purpose, so that picking up an Orb of Power grants us a Nova Shield based on our equipped Void Super. So all of those subclass fragments play a key role in buffing our build to make it as powerful as it can possibly be, so that we don't end up struggling when it comes to using the build in harder content. Now, artifact perks and tonics that play a key part in this build are Power from Pain, so that rapid final blows against weakened combatants grants Devour. Pretty pointless to us, but the boost that we get once it is active will give us a Void Breach, which is always handy for extra ability energy. But the 2 main perks that you want once you get the perk points to unlock them are Conductive Cosmic Crystal, so that the Void abilities deal more damage to enemies affected by a stasis debuff, with the boost increasing the bonus damage dealt, and then Served Cold, so picking up a Void Breach grants melee energy. That melee energy will just help us activate Devour from close range kills using our melee ability. When it comes to using the potions or tonics, make sure that you use the right one for the artifact perk that you want to boost. So before going into activities, just apply the right one that is highlighted, and that should allow you to benefit from that boost for the related artifact perk. For mods, I'd make sure that you're using 2 Ashes to Assets in their helmet along with a Kinetic Siphon for Bad JuJu. This will help you get more super energy from grenade kills, while also generating orbs of power to pick up as well. Then in the arms, you want a Firepower to spawn an orb on grenade kills, with a bolstering detonation for class ability energy when causing damage with that grenade. Chest armor is just for your damage resist mod, so apply the ones that you need for the related activity that you're going into. In the legs, I have my heavy weapons scavenger mod for damage, and then 2 innovations for reduced grenade cooldown, and then lastly in the class, just a distribution and 2 bombers for more ability cooldowns, because getting those abilities back as fast as possible should be your main priority in case you ever run out of that Devour and need to re-trigger it. Now, the last thing I want to touch on is the stat distribution. So I'd recommend getting Resilience as well as Discipline both to 100 so that you can have a higher damage resistance for more survivability in endgame content, and a faster grenade recharge rate for the times that you may end up making a bad throw and don't trigger Devour to get it back quicker. So having that passive cooldown will help you out a lot, but since we are on Prismatic, you're also going to have the Transcendence abilities as a last resort, which you should save for the times that you don't have Devour active, but also don't have any abilities up either, because that will be a huge help in endgame content, or content where you're being overwhelmed with ads. I wouldn't focus on mobility, strength, or recovery, because to be honest, those won't be of any use with this build. Maybe strength and recovery if you want those abilities back faster, but for me, I'd rather just throw the remaining spare points in intellect despite getting supers back fast anyway. So overall, this build is probably one of the best Warlock builds out right now for the Prismatic subclass as a dedicated Void Nova-Bomb build, especially for ad clearing and boss damage with faster and powerful supers and abilities. But I'd rather use this build in content when playing solo rather than being in a team, just because it can be a hassle to keep Devour active when you have at least 2 other teammates running around melting everything with their crazy OP builds as well. But either way, an amazing build to use this season in Destiny 2 Episode Revenant for the Final Shape year. So definitely give it a try. You can find the full dim link over on my Mobilix page, which is linked down below, so feel free to check that out, as well as the playlist for more top amazing builds this season. So stay tuned for more builds, and I'll see you guys in that next video.